Hey everyone, I have a garden idea that I'm going to try today. I don't know if it's a good or bad idea, but it's going to happen anyway. And I love those things the best in the garden because I know I'm going to learn something either way. But today is going to be focused all on my tomatoes, so we're going to stay on the front deck. I have to do some pruning because I really haven't pruned much yet at all. And then I'll show you the idea that I'm gonna do. Now let me give you a quick recap of my tomato journey so far this season. So I think I started from seed somewhere between 4 to 6 different cells of tomatoes. I typically only have room for 2, maybe 3 in my garden, so I know that I was starting more than I needed. Guess how many of the ones I started from seed are in my garden? 0. Not because I didn't try to put them in the garden, so let me show you the tomatoes I'm working with and give you a little bit of backstory as far as what happened. So I prefer to grow my tomatoes in these large 30-gallon grow bags. If you're looking for larger containers and not spending a lot of money, get grow bags because these 30 gallons were around $5 each. But my original plan was just to have 2 cherry tomato plants. So 2 of the tomato plants that produce smaller tomatoes. 1 here, 1 here. I had, like I said, I think 4 to 6. I knew I had extra. I'd already given some away. I planted 1 of the tomato plants I started from seed here. And then I also got sent a pack of veggies from Burpee. And even though I was still excited about the ones I started from seed, I did want to try one of theirs. So I decided that I was also going to do the small fruited tomato unicorn red. So that's what's in this bed. So I had 1 from Burpee, 1 I started myself, and then the one I started myself just straight up died. It's one of those things where I'm not exactly sure why it died, but it did. So because of that, I decided to go to Home Depot and get another tomato plant, but that wasn't this one. The tomato plant I got, well, I grabbed a tomato plant from the cherry tomato section. Now, just a quick note, the reason why I prefer cherry tomatoes over like the beefsteak or larger tomato varieties is that I've just had a lot better luck with them. I think in containers, so oftentimes with tomato plants you can get like end blossom rot, you can get them splitting, and I've had a ton of issues with that over the years growing the larger sized tomatoes. So ever since maybe last year, or was it the year before, I officially just switched to cherry tomatoes just because they do much better for me. And again, with limited space, I don't want to give precious space away to a plant that I know doesn't usually do well. So that's why I was intending to grab a cherry tomato plant from the cherry tomato section at Home Depot. So as I was planting the plant from Home Depot, originally in this bed, I saw the tag, and the tag said big boy tomato, and I was like, you know what, that doesn't seem like a cherry tomato variety, and it's not. It produces the larger tomatoes. So at first I was just gonna give in to my mistake, but again then I started thinking, like, you know, limited space, I really want to get plants that I love in here. So I went to another garden center, Gethsemane Garden Center, made sure I was getting the right type. This is a super sweet 100 tomato plant, so I grabbed that. It was already pretty big when I got it, and I now place this cherry tomato plant here. But of course I couldn't just get rid of the other tomato plant. Could I have given away? Probably. So here is the I don't think this is a good idea, but I'm going to do it anyway part of the garden. I put it here. So I have 3 zinnias. I had 4. Again, another one died. Unknown reasons, just came out one day, it was drooped over. It was after a storm, so a storm might have broken it or damaged it. So I put the tomato plant in there. Now tomato plants get big, which is why we're gonna be doing some pruning today. So here's my idea. My idea is I will try to keep things pruned, and I'm going to attempt to grow this tomato like very, very vertically, almost like a columnar apple tree that I have a couple of, and just try to keep it very narrow. And we're gonna see if that works or not. If it works, great. I mean, honestly, if I get 1 tomato from it, I'll be happy. If it doesn't, I'll have learned something from next year. Now, another thing I'm doing, because I don't have any more tomato cages, and actually these that I do have are kind of flimsy, so I'm probably gonna get different ones for next year, but I'm gonna also try to use my old sunflower and dahlia stalks to create supports for it, because I don't want to go out and buy a whole new cage. It's probably also going to like get in the way of the zinnias that are already planted. So I'm going to try to construct my own cage. So that's going to be part of the fun of today. I'll probably prune first, just so I can clear out some space before I go ahead and do my little garden experimentation. So let's do that first. I will take you up close to my cherry tomato plants. We'll do some pruning. I'll talk you through that, and then we will go about trying to create a columnar tomato plant. So the first thing you want to know before you start pruning your tomato plant is what type of tomato plant it is. And I don't mean the variety, but I mean whether it is determinate or indeterminate. And if it doesn't say in the plant tag, which hopefully it does, then Google the variety name and then determinate or indeterminate, and that should tell you. Because if you have a determinate plant, you don't want to prune it all. Determinate plants are going to get to a certain height, they're going to stop growing, and they produce all of their fruit at once. So if you prune, you're taking away some of that production. Well, I mean, you can prune or not prune anything you want, but in general with determinate tomatoes, you don't want to prune so you can get that full harvest. They're not going to grow quite as crazy as indeterminate tomatoes. So indeterminate, those you do want to prune. Again, do you have to? No, you can let it go crazy. You can let it grow all across the ground and not even need to use a tomato cage, whatever you want to do. But in order to keep things under control, and especially in my garden where I already plant things closer together because I'm limited on space, I want to make sure that I prune my tomato plants both for size control, but also just for like disease issues. The more airflow that can get through the tomato plant and all the other plants that it's shoved next to, the better. So that's why I'm pruning. I'm also really great at pruning, maybe until about August, when all of my maintenance tasks kind of get left behind. So I am going to try though to keep more on top of it this year, but all three of my plants are indeterminate. So the two on the end, the cherry tomato plants, I'm going to prune, but not as aggressively as I'm going to try with the big boy tomato plant. So I'm going to take you up close to, we'll probably just do the burpee one together because I think that one's a little bit more wild right now. And then I'll show you what I do to prune those plants. And this is ongoing. It's not like I prune once and I'm done. I should keep doing this throughout the season, even as we get closer to the end of the season. The first thing I'm going to do to prune my tomato plants is to go ahead and remove the tomato suckers. So these are small shoots, you can see this right here, that grow between the stem and the branch. And if you let these grow, which again you can if you want to, but if you let these grow, these are going to become stems that are as large as the other stems on here, and they can also produce tomatoes. So if they can potentially produce tomatoes, why would we remove them? Well, if you leave them on here, it can create, well, just a whole mass of leaves and stems, which can make it harder to support, especially if you have a flimsy support like mine, which is why I'm going to replace it. But it also can take up a lot of space overall, and the suckers can compete with the main parts of the plant, resulting in smaller tomatoes. So again, is this something you have to do? No. Is it something I'm going to do to control the size of this plant? Yes. And when the suckers are still small like this is like the easiest part to prune. You just pinch and it's gone. Now, if they do get larger than that, because let's say you haven't been on top of your pruning, not that I know anybody who would do that, then you'll want to go ahead in with some pruners and cut them out. But this is the one I just got, so there's not as many suckers on here yet. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on the larger one, which I already still can't believe how tall it is. So this here is my largest tomato plant. It's my height, I think, already, which is crazy. There's already a bunch of green tomatoes on it. It'll be a little bit before they start turning red, but I have maybe removed just a handful of suckers. So there is plenty of work for me to do. So what I'm going to do in here, again, just with, well, this one's pretty big, so I'm going to use my pruners here and cut that out. Now I could throw this sucker in my composter, which is on the back deck, but honestly, if I remove leaves but they're not diseased, I just drop them in the grow bag and let them break down. And that is the easiest method for me. So yeah, I have some larger suckers here that are too big for me to pinch, but then I have some little tiny ones right here that I am going to pinch off. And I actually find this process pretty meditative. I don't know, I really like pruning. It's just the actual getting out here and doing it part, especially now when things are just growing like crazy and I'm still, I don't know, kind of finishing up planting, just starting maintenance. I'm like, oh, this has been growing the entire time I've been doing it, and it's pretty big now. I'm gonna grab this large sucker. So yeah, just look between the main stem and the branches, and if you see something growing between it, you can go ahead and pinch that off. Also, I love the way my hands smell after working with tomato plants. So another way you can prune, and I usually do this at planting time, is to cut off the lower branches. I've already cut off a few here, but I'm also gonna remove this one. This just helps prevent any splashback on to the leaves of the plant, which can help reduce the likelihood of some diseases with your tomato plant. So I think that's pretty good height now with the bottom. Also, when you're pruning, you don't want to take off too much at a time. Like I wouldn't, cut off half of these branches, although I have done some pretty hard prunes in my lifetime. But I think the general rule of thumb is to aim for like no more than a third of the plant. But that's why it's better to stay on top of this too, instead of doing it all at once in here. Okay, I'm sure I'm missing some, but I think I've gotten the majority of the suckers that I'm going to grab. So the next part for me is just going to be pruning off anything else that seems like it's in the way. So it might not necessarily be a sucker, or I'm seeing some that are suckers I've let grow too long, but anything that I think is crisscrossing over or just in the way, I'm gonna remove those too. You can also top your tomato plants, so I might do that. Not quite yet. I'm not gonna do it today, but I might do it pretty soon, because as these branches get taller and actually start producing the fruit, they'll get heavier and start to curve back down, which then can lead them to break or just get in the way of other plants. So I don't know, I might hold on that and we'll see, but let me bring you over here and show you some of the other branches I'm gonna remove. So it might be a little hard to see because there's just a whole mass of branches here, but I'm actually going to take off this branch right here, which is pretty large, but I can tell that this was a sucker I let go because there was something growing here, a stem, and then this was coming out between. So it's growing up, it's hitting this branch above it, the leaves are growing into that branch there. So that's why I'm gonna remove it. And I used to feel bad about removing branches this large, and then I realized how much better it makes my garden. So just chopping these up, and again, just kind of dropping them in the raised beds and grow bags to break down. As far as when to prune, I basically just do it when it fits in my schedule. I try not to do it if it's super hot, like right at noon when it's super hot outside, because the plant is already experiencing some stress from the heat. But overcast day like today, morning, evening, not only for the plant's benefit, but also my benefit, because I don't particularly want to be out here doing a bunch of garden work when it is super hot outside. I think I'm almost at a good point. I know this is going to get in this bed, it's going to get in that bed. So at that point, I'll also prune more of the sides, but this is good. So now let's go ahead and work on my questionable tomato plan. So like I said, I don't have another tomato cage. I don't have any more cages actually. They're all in use, and I don't want to spend money on this idea. So these are sunflower stalks. Some I think are from last year, some might be from 2 years ago, but I always save mine to use as supports either for things in my garden or for houseplants. In fact, I'm actually using a dahlia stalk right here to support this tomato cage that was bent in the storm that we just had. So I'm going to use these, make some sort of cage. I'll probably use 4. No, I think I'll use 3, make a little triangle around it, and then I will use twine and just keep adding twine as it goes. This is the part where I am making this up as I go along. Do I recommend it? Not yet, because I don't know how it's going to work, but it'll be fun to try. I have chosen 3 of the tallest stems, and I'm just going to stick them down into the soil. And I would say the grow bag is, let me take a look, maybe 18 inches deep, if not 2 feet. So I'm hoping that this will be sturdy enough, because obviously these are dried stems. They're not made of metal. So we'll see how they hold up to this, but that feels pretty sturdy. We'll stick you right here. And then you will be in the front here. Yeah, I think that's good. And this plant is still small overall. So I'm I'll pinch out some of the suckers I see, but I'm not going to do a lot of pruning yet. All right, let's see if you can come down a little bit in there. And then I'm going to get some twine to make this a little bit more narrow because they're kind of splaying out right now. I never expected to use as much twine as I do in the garden. So if you don't have twine on hand, definitely get some. But I think my idea, maybe I'll scooch you out of the way for a second. But I think my idea is put that around there, and I'm gonna like do a little twist. And then bring it around these two. Do just a little twist around. Another thing I like about using the sunflower stalks in particular is that they are a little rough. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but they are, like the material on them is rough, unlike a metal bar, which is smooth. So the twine stays in place. Whereas if I'm using like a metal bar, then it slides up and down. But this is a pretty good job of staying in place. I actually want to pull this one in a little bit more. I think that's good. And again, with twine, nothing here is permanent, so I can always adjust it later. This is always the time where I wish I had 3 hands in the garden, 2 to tie a knot and 1 to hold things in place. I think this is good. We'll see how it unfolds going forward. I'm going to trim some of this, and then actually let me just remove the suckers that are coming up right now, because even if you trim off some branches, like suckers are still gonna try to grow in between there. So this one, like I said, I'm gonna try to keep very vertical and see what happens. I mean, like right now it seems like, oh great, definitely gonna work. Let the tomato plant get a little bit bigger, and then we will see about that. Trim these ends, not because you have to, just for my own aesthetic purposes, and then I'm gonna put some twine around. Actually, I might twine up now, because I think that'll be better than trying to twine up once the tomato plant gets larger. So same process, I'm just kind of twisting the twine around, and then around each of these on the side, and then tying this in place. I mean, honestly, support-wise, not terrible. Not much different than these. So while I can't say this is the best decision I've ever made in the garden, I think this is far from the worst decision I've made. I have high hopes. I feel like I usually have high hopes for these kinds of things, so we'll see how it actually goes. But my plan then will just be, as this tomato gets taller, keep trying to prune it and make it as vertical as possible, because this is definitely planted closer to other plants that are also going to get the same height, whereas these tomato plants are in the 30-gallon grow bag. There are plants next to them, but these plants are staying small, so they're not competing for space up here at all. So we'll see how this does. Worst comes to worst, if it's going terribly, I can always pull it. And that's the thing with gardening, is like very few things are permanent. So I definitely put more thought into the things that will be permanent. Like, well, I was gonna say like which raised beds I'm going to get, but I kind of just went crazy there as well when I started. But things like plants, I can pull them if they're not working. I can move them around. That tomato's been moved twice. So I like being able to, like I said, test things in the garden, try things out, see how this goes. I am excited to see if I can get, a columnar tomato plant like I have my columnar apple trees. And I think that's everything for this video, because those are the 3 tomato plants I have. I will keep you updated on how these do going forward. I mean, we are still, I want to say early in the season, but we're about halfway through the season already. So, but I know these are going to explode in growth a lot bigger than they are right now. So I'll keep you updated on how all of this goes and if I like it. So yeah, that's gonna be everything. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any recommendations for anything that I've done, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.